Good morning.
Let me forget mine either.
It is 9 o'clock and you all are on time, so we're going to get started. I am Kat Ogle. I am an assistant professor of emergency medicine at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And this is my fabulous panel of illustrious millennials. Arjun, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Arjun Prabhu. I'm a PGY2 at Mount Sinai. And I went to medical school at the University of Pittsburgh.
And why are you interested in this topic? Why did you jump on this train?
Yeah, so I think the reason why I was interested in it is I think there's a lot of opportunities to share between some of the benefits that we bring to the table from our respective generations. And it was kind of an interesting project to be able to look at that and hopefully share with you guys some best practices and hear from you also about some of the best practices that you guys do.
Awesome. Thank you. Tina?
Hi, everyone. My name's Tina. I'm a current PGY3 at Mount Sinai. I jumped on this train because I feel like I'm at an impasse in between the two where I'll always be a mentee, and I hope to be a mentor and continue to be a mentor. And being a millennial, I feel like we're going to have more people to mentor and mentee with, and kind of crossing that divide and having it be optimal for everyone. So it's good learning.
Awesome. Meryl?
I'm Meryl. I am currently a third year at the University of Arkansas. The reason why I was very interested in this topic was because just growing up, mentorship was a very big thing. And then just like Tina, I'm also at the cusp of I'm always going to be a mentee, but being a mentor is also something I'm very interested in. And then specifically for our program at UAMS, we were able to make a mentorship program. So we were very interested in finding ways to better that for our co-residents.
Awesome. Thank you. John?
Hi, I'm Joan. Thanks for coming, everyone. I'm a PGY2 over at University of Arkansas with Meryl. So I'm also very interested in the mentorship stuff. I help run it over at our residency program. I've definitely been in the role of both a mentee and a mentor throughout my career. And I'm just super interested in kind of combining both like the attendings, the residents, and the medical students and kind of doing a cross-generational mentorship approach.
Awesome. Nehal?
Hey everyone, I'm Nehal Naik. I'm a PGY1 at George Washington University in DC. The reason I got interested in this topic is the mentor-mentee relationship is interesting at baseline. It's something that from RAMS we work on constantly. The millennial stuff is fascinating because it's just something I live and breathe without realizing. And then you meet someone out of a different generation and it seems to clash. However, breaking those boundaries is what we're all about. So.
Awesome. Thank you. I'd like to be the first to introduce Dr. Wendy Sun at a national meeting.
So hi everybody, my name is Wendy. I recently graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University and I'll be starting up at Yale in around 3 weeks. For me, mentorship has been so important in my life so far, and I think with the current technology and social media, I'm very interested before I embarked on this kind of journey to see how mentorship and technology intersects with one another. So that's why I'm on the panel. Thank you so much for being here, you guys.
Awesome. All right, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason. I'm a PGY1 at Stanford University. I chose this topic because I feel like throughout my medical career that you're always making decisions before you may have all the necessary data or experience, and I feel like that's the key role that mentors provide in our lives, that they have that mental map, that model, and the wisdom to help guide decisions when you might not be able to make great ones yourselves.
Awesome. So I'm Kat. I'm a PGY 11, and I have always been interested in education in general and have more recently been interested in the role of a mentor. And I myself feel like I'm at this transition between being a mentee and a mentor. I have folks coming out to me to seek mentorship, and I feel ill-equipped to do so. So how better to become better equipped at doing something than to study it and research it? I think this topic in particular is a passion of mine because I notice some of our faculty in different areas struggling with the millennial generation for a multitude of reasons. And we're hoping to explore some of those in small groups today. I just want to draw your attention to our hashtag. So if you decide to tweet anything, we have a dedicated hashtag, so try to use that. And before we break into our small groups, I'm going to talk a little bit about what defines a millennial and some key characteristics of the mentor-mentee relationship. So here's just a listing of the general age groups of each of the generations. Now, I'm sure many of you have experience with this and realize that there are some folks that may not necessarily identify with their particular generation. And oftentimes that's someone who is close to the cusp of those years. So you may find someone who is a millennial by numbers, but not necessarily identifying with the characteristics of a millennial. And I think this is the really important part of fostering conversations to figure out where people are and how they can really bring their strengths to the table and how you can share your shared experiences and help build them up with their professional development. So this is a list of characteristics that is pretty typical for baby boomers. How many baby boomers are in the room? Okay. Would you guys say that these are characteristics that you identify with? Somewhat. What would you add? This is the interactive portion of the day. Okay, we'll save it for the small groups. These are some of the common characteristics that are listed as millennial characteristics. How many millennials are in the room? Okay. I didn't put all the generations up. We had a limited amount of time, and so I picked two sort of outliers. This is a list of characteristics and sort of roles and responsibilities that I extracted from the AAMC toolkit on mentoring. And so if you look at the left side of the screen, you see things that we would consider in the mentee category. And I think some things that I want to draw your attention to is, as a mentee, one of the things that I didn't really know is that it was partially my responsibility to state what my needs are. And so when you are a mentee and you're coming to the table to try to get guidance for something, you really have to know what it is you're trying to get guidance about. It may take some time for you to formulate your question. It may take some time through multiple discussions and kind of figuring out where you're going and what your trajectory is, but you are the person who's responsible for setting the tone and really saying to your mentor what you need. That allows a collaborative discussion in which your mentor can say, yes, I'm the right person to help you for that, and I am committed to doing that for you. Some of the characteristics are the same in both groups. So both folks should be committed, and both folks should maintain confidentiality, of course, when they're having sensitive topic conversations. But I think when you go on to sort of talking about discussing the relationship and the scope of the relationship for the mentee, that really boils down to how does the mentee communicate? How does the mentee want to communicate? And for you as a mentor, is that something that you have flexibility with, or do you have a different way of communicating? And can you guys come to a mutual understanding about the best way to move forward with your relationship? I'm not going to go through this too much. Again, this is just some food for thought. I want to get into the group so we can really have some rich discussions. So what I'd like to do is, all of these folks have their subject matter expertise in this topic. And so they're going to join the table. I want you guys to pick a topic that you like the most, or that you have questions about, or you have experience with, or you have struggled with, and join our panelists at a table for a discussion. Each of the discussions is going to be about 12 minutes. I will give you a 1-minute warning before we're ready to transition, and then you'll be able to pick a second group, all right? So why don't you guys find tables, and then you guys ponder which groups you want to be involved in a discussion on. All right, guys. So if you're following along on Twitter, we're about to share a PDF that is a summary of the literature review that these guys have done in preparation for this meeting. You will also find a hyperlink to each of your facilitators so that you can go to their home institution to connect with them or to their Twitter page to connect with them. And always feel free to follow me on Twitter, and if you want to know more or connect with these guys, I can certainly facilitate those conversations, because 12 minutes is not a lot of time to address some of the issues that came up, and I want to make sure that this is a continued conversation. So we have 6 focused areas of best practices that we spent some time on. This does not, by any means, a comprehensive list. There are other things that I heard come up in your conversations that perhaps we did not address today that probably need to be also addressed. But I just want to go through the best practices for each of these. So, Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about technology and communication?
Yeah. So I think we talked about how, in general, I think there's a lot of different ways to communicate technologically, and that sometimes we get inundated with all the different modalities that there are. But I think at the end of the day, millennials really crave or would like a personal, frequent contact with their mentor. And so we talked about how sometimes it's hard to send an email and get a response back, but that we found in other situations where if you're, as a mentor, you've kept in contact with your mentee, maybe by sending texts every once in a while to check in and see how people are doing. Then when you do send an email, it's more impactful because you do have that relationship with them of having this open dialogue. One thing that really came up during the group discussion that wasn't on here that I realized that I do too, but is really important, is that when you do send emails, to kind of have like it's like on the internet we call it TLDR, so it's like too long, don't read, where you just put a quick summary at the top, like 3 bullet points of what this email is important for and like the action items. And then the rest of the body of the email is afterwards. And so you can quickly kind of grab the attention of the short attention span millennials on what you want, and then they will continue to read the email.
Awesome. Thank you. Meryl, you want to talk about intergenerational bias?
Yeah. So through the small group discussions that we had, I realized that there are a lot of disconnects between the mentors and then the millennial mentees. I think that the biggest thing to take away is that not only to recognize that there's a difference, but to try to understand why that difference is there, because it's only when you understand that difference that you're able to address the needs that your mentee actually has. We ran out of time, so I'll briefly talk about some of the ways to address this. Some of the biases that are there, right, are millennials are impatient. We're not wanting to wait. Versus we're efficient because we use technology, we get our answer. That's kind of like, that's how fast, like we're just fast. We just like getting our answer right away. Entitled versus motivated, oftentimes there's that disconnect where we don't want to do something, right? But oftentimes what you need to do is explain it to them, the reason why you're doing it. We're very goal-oriented, so if you guys tell us, this is why you're doing it, this is what can happen, et cetera, that helps keep us motivated, and that helps us better want to get stuff done. And then the other thing is like needy versus, like some people think we're needy because we come into your guys' office like several times, multiple times in a day sometimes, versus we're disengaged. We're very used to the social community and getting and interacting with all of our friends and social media and technology, and so we just want to be able to best communicate with everybody, and sometimes there's that disconnect with just that neediness versus just wanting to talk to you guys and get your input. Ways to address this, there's a few things. One, keeping communication open, figuring out how, like Kat said, communication, how can you best talk to them and figure out what they need, and then what are your limits? Like where do you stop, and where do you stop from that standpoint? Other thing, providing structure and motivation, which we talked about. We grew up with helicopter parents who kind of told us what to do, when to do it, and so that sometimes you need to break that down for us. And then adapt or reverse mentoring. Hierarchy is often, we understand what hierarchy is, but once again, we grew up in a very collaborative environment. And so reverse mentoring allows the mentee to be able to feel like they're participating in their actual relationship, and also helps the mentor grow as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that there are things that mentors need. There are limits that mentors have. And so I think one of the most essential things is that you guys have an open communication and a dialogue about what the expectations are from both parties and come to a middle ground. All right, professionalism and boundaries. Nehal and Tina, you guys had a big topic.
All right, so our groups were very animated in their discussion. The first is respect for each other's time. A lot of this stems from the different values that both millennials and non-millennials have about time and about work. Other generations tend to speak about work as identity, that they derive their identity from work, and thus anything that challenges it is considered disrespectful. And millennials, however, don't derive value into our identity purely from work. It is only one part of the component of their life. One of the examples that came up about at least how millennials value other things besides work that I thought was very interesting was residents who come into a program and ask immediately about like their vacation schedule without talking about work. And that faculty member initially saw like this person's not, these people are not considering the work at hand, and instead ended up learning from their residents that no, they are thinking about it. However, they have commitments in their life upcoming that they need to plan throughout their year, whether it be weddings, friends' weddings that they need to respond to, that are important to their identity, and that's why they were asking them. It wasn't because they don't consider their work. The other side is that it was frequently brought up about work-life balance, or just what valuing time. When a lot of mentors are teaching, they see, look, my time is important because this is my work, you should respect it, and people should be off their phones when they're talking. Which I look around. I'm just kidding. That's fine. But again, it's part of what's become the millennial culture, which is kind of dispersed into the general culture. So that was a big thing that kind of came up, is respect for our time, but understanding where we derive value in our lives. One thing that did not come up is considering a relaxing yet professional dress code. This actually has been coming up a lot in corporate literature. Morgan Stanley, from the big investment banks, for years have been the staid suits of, how that hasn't changed since in Edwardian England. Actually, no. King Edward in the 1920s made this famous, and it hasn't changed since. But for the first time this year, Morgan Stanley says, you don't have to wear, unless you're seeing clients, you don't have to wear suits. So a lot of this stuff comes out of corporate literature, and yet obviously medicine's kind of fall a little bit behind. Outside of, say, your clinical environments where the people are changing what they're dressing anyway, with everyone wearing a white coat and scrubs, but in environments such as conferences, we're often asked, professionalism is an important part of your dress. Millennials often don't see their dresses related to that. We talk to our colleagues who are doing phenomenal things in the tech industry. Mark Zuckerberg famously does not wear a suit to work. It's a hoodie, and it's considered professional dress. One of the things we briefly discussed, funny yesterday, there's a brand called Beta Brand, not that I'm trying to sell a product, that sells pants that are called work pants, but they're sweatpants. So this kind of athletic leisure as a part of our work environment is an important part of our culture too.
Awesome. Tina?
So I'm going to cover communicating expectations, and I think that was something that came up repeatedly in both the small groups. And I think it's important for to clarify that this is about mentoring the millennial, and should not be. I think the issue is catering to a millennial. The important thing is to find a middle ground. One of the issues that came up in the group is expectations in terms of communication. For instance, sometimes we will see an APD or someone, and they'll be like, this is my cell phone. The expectation from a millennial standpoint oftentimes is, that means I can text them whenever. Because oftentimes we're texting at 1 a.m. The expectation from the millennial standpoint is, they gave me their phone number. That means I can text them whenever. However, oftentimes the other side is the expectation from a non-millennial is business hours. Be considerate of my time. Be considerate that I may be at dinner with my family, with my kids. So then it's important to communicate effectively. This is my cell phone number. Please text me during business hours, Monday through Friday, unless it's an emergency. please call otherwise, or something like that. And just being explicit from the very beginning. Because oftentimes, when those sorts of expectations are not made clear from the very beginning, it leads to discord in a relationship that may have flourished, that may have been a great mentor-mentee relationship. And unfortunately now, it's broken based on a bad interaction. And the other thing is, sorry, for the interest of time, bidirectional feedback. Studies have found that millennials are more accepting of feedback given through different modes of communication. Email, text, they're okay with. But they do prefer having real-time feedback, something close to the event itself or your shift. Immediately getting feedback is what they value. Versus other generations value more face-to-face time, where maybe office hours were more acceptable. So maybe an in-between is, hey, let's meet for 5 minutes after our shift so that we can discuss how you did or discuss how something went. And then it's also important, millennials find that having a relationship increases their likelihood of actually accepting feedback and actually changing from it. So if it is possible, if in my institution we have families, having a relationship, at least having some sort of conversation maybe that's not related to work, and then fostering in your feedback into that.
Awesome. Thank you. So sort of building on that face-to-face feedback, don't forget using technology is really helpful for that, because you can FaceTime with your mentees and give them some feedback, or you can Skype with your mentees and give them some feedback, and it feels more personal if you guys are face-to-face, even if it's a virtual situation. That also removes the limitations of geography and time. So you guys can figure out what's a good time to talk, what's a good time to connect, and then use technology to your advantage. All right, social media.
All right, so thank you to everyone who participated in this discussion. I think a lot of general themes came up in terms of kind of the types of mentoring that social media allows for. For social media, it's a really great tool for building the mentor-mentee relationship for external, group-based, virtual, and informal connections, because a lot of times when you have this social media presence online, a mentee feel less intimidated and feel like they know you a little bit better, and so that breaks down barriers for them to reaching out to mentors who are on social media, and it builds like a pipeline for engagement and recruitment. And so some action steps that you can implement is that within the folks in your program who are your mentees, you can ask them kind of and do this reverse mentoring where you find out what social media they engage in and how you could mentor them in the preferred social media way. And keep in mind with social media, everything, like everyone knows everything when it's online. So keep in mind that demonstrating professionalism and ethical use of social media as well when you foster these professional kind of mentee-mentor relationships.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we are running out of time, so we're going to breeze through these last two big topics, work-life balance. John?
Okay, work-life balance. I had two kind of subcategories of this, both work-life balance and academic versus clinical pathways. For work-life balance, we talked about how there's this bias that the older generations work too hard and that the millennials are lazy. So we talked about how you can overcome that bias. One of the ways that you can do that is by incorporating mentorship families. So having multi-generational mentorship. So incorporating both leadership, attendings, residents, and medical students into one big group. What that does is kind of broaden the amount of mentors that you have as well as the experiences. The second topic that I had was kind of balancing and talking about academics versus clinical pathways. Usually when you encounter your mentor, you're in an academic setting, so most mentors end up being academic. For that reason, it's very hard for us to provide mentorship for people that are going into community emergency medicine. But the fact of the matter is that most people are going into community medicine that are graduating from residency. So one of the things that we came up with was kind of incorporating scholarly tracks. Most programs already have this in place, but incorporating a community scholarly track into your residency program will help kind of engage your alumni in the community and allow for these residents to kind of have early mentorship in that field.
Awesome. Thank you, John. All right, last but not least, Arjun.
So I talked about virtual collaboration. So today, obviously, face-to-face interactions and even talking on the phone or Skype is a huge component of mentoring still. But there's also another component of sharing virtually that can be a very time-efficient and effective way to mentor, and even mentor multiple mentees at the same time that are kind of in the same stage. So some of the things we talked about were using resources such as Google Drive, Box, Dropbox as a way to share resources, collaborate, even help. You can even do personalized things like helping a mentee brainstorm a project or even just career aspirations, and provide on-the-fly feedback as well. So a good opportunity to sort of diversify the types of mentoring and keeping both people's time, particularly in parts of the year that are very busy, a little bit more time efficient. Awesome.
So in respect to the next folks who need to get set up, we don't really have time for questions, but please, and also in the spirit of virtual document sharing, again, we sent out a PDF on Twitter that has a summary of all of these topics. We would love your feedback. We would love your thoughts. If there's other literature that we're missing, we would love to have that. We would love to continue this conversation. I think the most important thing that I heard from today is that your choice of words and how you perceive this relationship is really impactful. So just keep that in mind as you move on to the next stage. Yes. It's not on the app, it's on Twitter. Yeah, so the hashtag's on the top of every slide. SAEM Mentor the Millennial. Thank you very much, you guys.